the largest churches in the United States. There's a woman who claims that Morris sexually assaulted her back in the 1980s when she was a child and Morris was a young man. Now, Lauren Crawford joins us live in studio with more. Lauren, this new information came out over the weekend, and as of this morning, at least, it appears that Morris is still leading Gateway Church.
Hey, good morning, Madison and Jason. Yeah, a religious watchdog blog publicized the woman's claims on Friday, which was then publicized by the Christian Post on Saturday. Now, a woman named Cindy Clemishire claims that Morris abused her starting when she was 12 years old from 1982 to 1987. Now, Morris gave a statement to the Christian Post saying, quote, "When I was in my early 20s, I was involved in an inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady in a home where I was staying. It was kissing and petting and not intercourse, but it was wrong. This behavior happened on several occasions over the next few years." According to the statement posted on social media right here on your screen from elders at Gateway Church, the allegations were brought to light 35 years ago. After that, Pastor Morris stepped away from ministry for 2 years to receive counseling. Morris acknowledged in a sermon in 2014 that he was, quote, sexually immoral when he was a teenager. Morris returned to ministry in March of 1989. 2 years after his abuse was exposed, he says, with blessing from the girl's father and church elders. He further noted that he and his wife met with the survivor and her family in October of 1989. Now, I have reached out to the church for a statement, and a bio on Gateway Church's website indicates that Pastor Morris has already announced plans to turn the leadership of the church over to his son, James Morris. That's said to happen sometime in spring of 2025. However, it says that Robert Morris would continue preaching some of the sermons, but at this point, guys, there is no indication that he has stepped down from his role.
It is one of the largest churches in the country. Now the founder and the senior pastor of Gateway Church in Southlake, Robert Morris, is admitting to inappropriate sexual behavior. Andrea Lucia spoke to the woman whose accusations prompted the admission. Andrea?
Cindy Clemishire was just 12 years old when she says Gateway senior pastor Robert Morris first molested her. This is 1982 that we're talking about. It predates the founding of the church. At the time, Morris was already married. He was a traveling preacher, and he was a close family friend of her parents.
First time he ever touched me at 12 years old, he said, "You can never tell anyone because it will ruin everything." And it did.
I spoke to Cindy Clemishire and her attorney, who said she first reported the abuse when she was 17. But it wasn't until this past week when a blog called the Wartburg Watch shared her account of being abused over a 4.5-year period that it became public knowledge. In a statement released by the church this weekend, Morris admits to what he describes as inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady for several years in his 20s. When Clemishire's father learned what was going on, she says he reached out to the church and demanded Morris step down from the pulpit. And for 2 years, Morris says he did, receiving counseling and ministry before returning in 1989 with the full blessing of the elders. Clemishire says it's been devastating.
Just constantly wondering why other leadership didn't do something about it, or how on earth could anyone let him be in leadership when they knew what he did to me.
In a statement released by the church's elders, they say that Morris has been open and forthright about what they describe as a moral failing, and that since it occurred decades ago, he has, quote, walked in purity. Now, under current law, repeated sexual contact with a child under the age of 14 it is a crime. It's a felony that's punishable up to 99 years in prison. No criminal charges have been charged in this case, and it is likely that the statute of limitations on any that could be filed has run out. Reporting live in South.
The pastor of Gateway Church, Robert Morris, has resigned. Morris is at the center of a decades-old allegation of child molestation. The victim was just 12 years old at the time.
I'm not to blame. I shouldn't have shame on me. I don't live in shame anymore.
Today, the Board of Elders says they accepted Morris's resignation and hired a law firm to independently review the details of his case.
The fallout from the resurfaced allegations has been swift. Robert Morris is the founder of Gateway Church, one of the largest churches in the country.
Upon news that he was stepping down, church elders who initially defended him now say they didn't have all the facts. Let's get straight to our Andrea Lucia, who has been following the story and was among the first to learn of Morris's resignation. What's the latest, Andrea?
Yeah, the now former pastor of Gateway Church, Robert Morris, admitted over the weekend to what he called an inappropriate sexual relationship. Church elders at the time told us this happened more than 35 years ago and that it had been properly disclosed to them. In a statement that came out within just the last hour or so, they now say they did not know the victim was only 12 years old or that the abuse lasted more than 4 years. They say their prior understanding was that Morris's extramarital relationship, which he discussed many times throughout his ministry, was with a young lady and not abuse of a 12-year-old child. That's the same term, by the way, Morris used in a statement just this weekend, young lady. Well, take a look at this picture of Cindy Clemishire at the age of 12. This is who we are talking about. She says that Morris's accounts of what happened suggest she was older than she was and that he was younger. In a sermon Morris gave 10 years ago, you can hear him discuss his sexual immorality as a teen.
I learned to lie and manipulate. Because I also had rejection, I didn't want to be rejected. So I looked for the girls that would be the most susceptible. And I learned how to spot this in girls.
At the time of Clemishire's alleged abuse, Morris was in his 20s and already married. Clemishire says that for many years she felt responsible and embarrassed. With age, she says she's learned better and gained the courage to speak out.
Has my mindset shifted? Yes. I'm not to blame. I shouldn't have shame on me. I don't live in shame anymore.
And church elders initially told us that Morris was being open and forthright about what they called his moral failure. They have now hired a law firm to review the chain of events between 1982 to 1987 to make sure that they do have a full understanding of what happened. They say of what they've learned so far in just the last few days, though, it has them appalled and heartbroken. And by the way, as soon as we learned about Morris's resignation, I reached out to Clemishire to break the news to her. She responded with just one word: wow.
I hope and pray that this is the beginning of the statute of limitations being lifted across the United States for children of sexual abuse.
Right now at 10 o'clock, the fallout tonight after Gateway megachurch pastor Robert Morris resigns after being accused of molesting a child. We have new reaction from his accuser and from the church. Gateway church leaders, they announced this evening that Morris is no longer the church for more than 1,000 members there, 100,000 members rather. As Marvin Hurst reports, his departure is not enough for the woman who says she was just a child when she was targeted.
Authority is given by God and God alone.
Pastor Robert Morris went from shepherd to shame in a matter of days.
I'm not to blame. I shouldn't have shame on me. I don't live in shame anymore.
Cindy Clemishire got a blog to publish her account of what she says happened between her and Morris between 1982 and 1987. The former megachurch pastor acknowledged what he called an inappropriate relationship on evangelical trips during his 20s with who he described as a young lady. Morris said he and his wife would stay at Clemishire's parents' home.
He said, "You can never tell anyone because it will ruin everything."
According to Gateway church leaders, the charismatic leader of thousands of souls in the Dallas-Fort Worth area stepped away from preaching to receive professional and ministry counseling. He was back in the pulpit in 1989 and founded Gateway 24 years ago. Morris resigned Tuesday afternoon. In a statement, Clemishire says, quote, "Though I am grateful that he is no longer pastor at Gateway, I am disappointed that the board of elders allowed him to resign. He should have been terminated," end quote. She also says, quote, "The leadership at Gateway received an actual notice of this crime in 2005 when I sent an email directly to Robert Morris's Gateway email address," end quote. Clemishire also asked, quote, why not expand the investigation to his entire tenure at Gateway Church, end quote. Upon accepting Morris's resignation, the church says, quote, the board has retained the law firm of Haynes & Boone LLP to conduct an independent, thorough, and professional review of the report of past abuse to ensure we have a complete understanding of the events from 1982 to 1987. They go on to say, regretfully, prior to Friday, June 14th, the elders did not have all the facts of the inappropriate relationship between Morris and the victim, including her age at the time and the length of the abuse. The elders' prior understanding was that Morris's extramarital relationship, which he had discussed many times throughout his ministry, was with a young lady, and not abuse of a 12-year-old child, end quote. In a sermon 10 years ago, the pastor did not identify who he was talking about when he said this.
I learned to lie and manipulate. Because I also had rejection, I didn't want to be rejected. So I looked for the girls that would be the most susceptible.
Now the fallout from the past is marring Morris's reputation, emotionally injuring his spiritual followers, and giving ears to the woman who waited 35 years to get heard. Marvin Hurst, CBS News, Texas.
Following Gateway Church pastor Robert Morris's resignation after sexual abuse allegations, questions have surfaced about why there is no chance of civil liability. It's something that has one local victims' rights attorney taking action. As our Aaron Jones tells us, she won't stop until there's reform.
It took Cindy Clemishire more than 40 years to publicly report Robert Morris, the founder and senior pastor of Gateway Church, sexually assaulted her, starting when she was just 12 years old.
There are so many reasons why victims of trauma take a long time.
New Friends New Life CEO Bianca Davis serves women and girls who've been trafficked and exploited. She says in this case in particular,
and so I think it's important to note the impact of spiritual abuse. So you have someone who is in a position of religious authority. They are revered by their congregations. They seem to have all the answers. It really toys with that person's sense of faith.
Michelle Simpson-Teagle, an attorney that specializes in victims' rights, says Clemishire will not be able to pursue civil claims against the church or her alleged abuser because it's too late under the statute of limitations in Texas or Oklahoma, where the victim says some of the abuse took place.
Well, in Texas, the statute of limitations now, as it stands in 2024, is that you have 30 years to file a civil sexual abuse claim if it happened when you were under the age of 18. But that law only went into effect in 2019.
She says Texas and Oklahoma have not passed what's called a revival window or retroactive statute of limitations, meaning Clemishire's window would be much smaller.
That it depends on what their date of birth is and when their abuse happened. This was in the 1980s. So back then, a 2-year statute of limitations would arguably have applied.
She's been working to change that and says several other states already have.
We were at the legislature last legislative session with a group of survivors trying to even get a hearing on it, and we could not even get a hearing on the issue.
So for now, the work continues. She says just this week she heard about local legislators talking about how the Gateway case is an example of why the law needs to change. It's bringing new hope. In Dallas, Aaron Jones, CBS News, Texas.
Gateway Church offering support to its members amid a sexual abuse claim against former pastor Robert Morris. What one of his former pastors is now saying about abuse happening in churches across the country. It has been a challenging week for the members of Gateway Church with the resignation of their founding pastor, Robert Morris. He's facing allegations of molesting a 12-year-old girl back in the 1980s. Tomorrow, 6 of their campuses head back to the sanctuary for service and for answers. Marvin Hurst with the weekend members will have to move on.
The website for the Gateway Church says to find hope, joy, and life. Well, in the past week, the church has found itself connected to a sex scandal involving its former pastor, Robert Morris. He's been removed from the church's leadership page, and these 9 men are spiritually and strategically trying to deal with the fallout. Morris's sermons, though, are still up.
Now, you got to remember, when I went to Shady Grove Church, I was a Southern Baptist evangelist.
It was during that time, from 1982 to 1987, that Cindy Clemishire says Morris, who would stay with her parents in Oklahoma, molested her. When the news broke on a blog, Morris and church leaders said he dealt with the issue of kissing and petting with someone the religious leader described as a young lady from an inappropriate relationship. Then elders say that they found out this week that young lady was allegedly a young girl. Morris resigned from the church he started 24 years ago.
So my personal response was just an instant empathy for the victim, and then secondarily kind of that anger and response.
One of his former pastors at Gateway talked to the Christian Broadcast Network in the wake of the resignation about abuse happening in many churches.
It's my opinion and observation that there really is an epidemic of abuse within, and in many cases from, the church itself. There's this massive shift taking place. In fact, I would go so far as to say we're well into a significant reformation.
That reformation won't mean criminal charges for the former pastor. The statute of limitations expired, but Morris's cloud of shame remains.
But an inappropriate relationship is not the same thing as abuse. Abuse is committed by one person against another person.
Gateway has an orange banner on its site with a message from church elders. In part, it says, quote, "Our church congregation is hurt and shaken, and we know that you have many important questions. We want to answer as many of your questions as we can at this point," end quote. It goes on to say this weekend, a globally respected pastor will, quote, "be preaching to our church family and offering us an important message for this unthinkable time," end quote. The message also says, quote, "Please be praying for those affected, including Cindy Clemishire, her family, the Morris family, Gateway members, staff, and others," end quote. Per their website, services at 6 of the church's campuses are on Saturday at 4. Marvin Hurst, CBS News, Texas.
Services actually resuming for the first time today ever since founding pastor Robert Morris resigned due to sexual assault allegations against a young child. Our Olivia Leach was there hearing reaction from leaders and longtime members.
It was a packed house at the South Lake location of the Gateway Church as they held their Saturday service. The congregation still reeling from the news that their founding pastor was accused of sexually assaulting a young girl starting in 1982 when she was just 12 years old. A church elder began today's service with an emotional message for the church community.
As an elder, I did not know the truth. And frankly, like so many of you, my wife and I are shocked, devastated, and grieving. Firstly, I'd like to express my personal compassion for Cindy Clemishire. I can't imagine carrying a burden like that for so many years. And I want to say to you, Cindy, I'm so sorry.
Pastor Morris's accuser, Cindy Clemishire, says the abuse continued until 1987. Pastor Morris was a traveling evangelist at the time and was close to the accuser's family. In a statement to the Christian Post, Morris admitted to, quote, inappropriate sexual behavior. And a statement posted on social media from elders at the church said the allegations were brought to light 35 years ago, and Morris stepped away for 2 years to receive counseling.
Simply put, abuse in any form cannot be tolerated. And we as elders have the responsibility to do whatever it takes to learn the truth.
Outside today's service, protesters held signs supporting Pastor Morris's accuser and called on the church to protect children. Some got into heated exchanges with church members.
When I heard that this pastor had got away with molesting a child and now is worth $100 million and has people following him in this church, I felt like a voice needed to be had for the voiceless.
Protesters are also calling for accountability from church leadership.
To find out who really knew about this on the elders, from their leadership. It would be nice if there was accountability. We'd like to see the Pastor Morris go to jail.
But longtime church members like Lou Comunale says it was important for them to be here today to hear what church leadership had to say.
I think it was on target. I think he did not hide behind the shame. There is a certain amount of shame that, you know what, that it brought to the church, but we went beyond that. And we're not just looking to one man, we're looking to Jesus Christ. And this church is going to thrive because they fessed up.
The church says they have hired an outside law firm to conduct an independent inquiry into the allegations. In Southlake, Olivia Leach, CBS News, Texas.
Shocked, devastated, and grieving. That is how a Gateway Church elder reacted this weekend to the accusations that the church founder allegedly sexually assaulted a child decades ago. The church has now hired a new law firm. They're investigating what happened all those years ago. And our Andrea Lucia showing us how Morris's own words may be coming back to haunt him.
Good luck sleeping tonight. As protesters gathered outside,
I did not know the truth.
Gateway Church this weekend directly addressed Cindy Clemishire, the woman who says she was sexually abused by its founder as a child.
And I want to say to you, Cindy, I'm so sorry.
Robert Morris, who admitted to, in his words, an inappropriate sexual relationship with a young lady, has now lost his position as senior pastor at the church and had his programming pulled from Daystar Television.
I've seen fallen leaders restored many, many, many times. It really can be done.
In a 2017 interview, he addressed the importance of honesty.
If you start covering up again, because he's been covering up for however many years we're involved in this, if you start covering up again, that's when everything stops. It all shuts down. So that's the biggest thing you have to work with.
But Morris's own accounts of his past failures are now in question. Church elders say Morris disclosed to them he'd had an extramarital affair, not that he'd abused a 12-year-old. Morris and the church have also claimed he underwent a 2-year restoration process that included him stepping out of the ministry during that period. In his book, From Dream to Destiny, he wrote, "The Lord orchestrated the circumstances for me to step out of the ministry in order to humble his growing pride. But that after a month of working nights as a security guard at Motel 6, he took a job as morning supervisor at a ministry prayer center." Partially redacted emails released by Clemishire's attorney show nearly 2 decades later, in 2005, she reached out to Morris, writing, "You have had almost no consequences for your actions. I have suffered almost my entire life from the emotional damage you inflicted on me. I want some type of restitution." In response, an email from what appears to be Morris's account reads, "If you desire to make this public, I am also willing to do so." But it warns, "My attorney advises that if I pay you any money under threat of exposure, you could be criminally prosecuted. And Debbie and I do not want that."
The Debbie that Morris is referring to there is his wife of more than 40 years. The two were married at the time of the alleged abuse, and their son James is the associate senior pastor here at Gateway. In fact, James was chosen as his father's successor last year, and according to Gateway's website, he is now the only one in a position of senior leadership at the church.